Okay. Oh, we're getting a wave.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so let's get the meeting started. First, we want to do a roll call so that we can get recognition of quorum, and I'll hand that over to Roger.
Thank you. Todd Rutman,
Here.
Tom Castellini,
Here.
David Roush,
Here.
Steve Heron,
Here.
Carol Mullet,
Yes, I'm here.
Carol Weber,
Here.
Michael Billig is not present, and I had received a note that Steve Freeland was not going to be able to join us either. But we do have 6 members, so we do have a quorum.
Excellent. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda for today?
Yes.
All right. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
All motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Roger, do you have to do a roll call then on that, or?
Yes, we will do a roll call vote, so please just say yay or nay. Todd Rutman,
Yay.
Tom Castellini,
Okay.
David Roush,
Yay.
Steve Heron,
Yay.
Carol Mullet,
Yay.
Carol Weber.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the approval of minutes from the April 27th meeting. If everybody has had a chance to take a look at that, if there's any questions or requested changes, please let us know.
I
All right,
I did make a note that I sent to everyone yesterday that there probably should have been a note in there about there were 2 letters that we had received, not just the one.
yes.
Can we make a motion to approve it with that adjustment, and then I can make a modification and reissue it for next meeting?
Okay, that sounds good. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
All right. Roger, if you'll run us through the,
Roll call vote again.
Yep.
Tom Castellini,
Yay.
David Roush,
Aye.
Steve Heron,
Aye.
Carol Mullet,
Yay.
Carol Weber,
Yay.
Todd Rutman.
yay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, moving on to the financial summary, which is in the packet. We had a starting balance of $50,000 this year. We have, since the last meeting, acquired another $50,000 for a total of $100,000. That additional $50,000 is not indicated on this financial spreadsheet. But we do have that additional funding for this year. Pending payout was $25,000 for the co-hatch project. And we'll be talking about that today for some additional funding as well. And then we've got other active projects are 135 South Main Street and 95 East Oak Street, both of which we'll be talking about today as well. Any questions on the financial summary?
Nope.
All right. So then moving on to old business, 75 North Main Street, the co-hatch project. As mentioned last month, they were approved for the $25,000 amount. But their original ask was more than that. And so today we would like to talk about additional funding for that project. And do we have representatives of Cohatch on the call today?
We do, and I'm promoting Tim Lai, the architect.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good.
Great. Yeah, thanks for joining us again today. We do not need any kind of a formal presentation unless there's anything that you want to say to start off with.
Not really. I just want to thank you for this commission last month to approve our project.
And then the numbers, just kind of taking a look at the financial numbers related to this project was $163,496 on the last spreadsheet that I have. Is that still the correct amount?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So if we take that amount times 40%, that would set the eligible amount at 65,000. But you know, we have a cap at 25,000, but we had previously talked about funding $50,000 of that. So I believe what we should be discussing today is whether or not our members are comfortable approving another $25,000 for the project for a grand total of $50,000. So with that, I'll open it up for any discussion for or against that.
I do have a question. I had to leave the meeting early last month. Can you just give us a quick summary? I'd like to have a quick summary of what we did approve last month.
This is Dave. I can speak to that. Without knowledge of the total amount we were going to have available this year, and knowing that there were pending applications, we basically approved the project up to the $25,000 cap, was sort of a goodwill gesture that if and as the funding is increased, that would allow additional projects to be considered for the year, that we would come back and revisit it when that happened. And obviously that has happened pleasantly quickly. And so that's what brings us here. So they've basically got a green light for 25 and are seeking, you know, additional funding to round out their application. And having said that, I'm probably going to recuse myself from this discussion going forward, just because we're, you know, representing another applicant, you know, in the pipeline here.
Thanks, David. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Tom, were you talking about the specific items that they had shown that they were doing what we had asked, or were you just talking about the financial end of it?
I think I was asking for both a little bit of a clarification. For some reason, I don't have that report. I didn't get it electronically, so I'm a little bit in the dark. So so basically, we're just trying to approve an additional 25. No, I think my question's been answered. Thanks.
Yeah, and for those that were at the meeting last month, just clarify that the design as presented met the requirements that we had talked about the previous month, and that there are no outstanding design issues. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say that's correct, that we were impressed with the fact that they had come back and looked at and changed all of the items that we had expressed reservation about in terms of placement and signage and the handicap accessibility. All of those things had been updated in a way that we felt was very positive.
I do have one other question. So our budget sits at 100,000 right now. Well, actually 75,000. With this additional, that takes us back to a 50,000 budget, and we have possibly two other projects in the pipeline. I have no idea about the Nicholson Orthodontics Group. Do we have any idea of what I know Karen and I have spoken with them, but I have not seen anything that they have formally presented.
I think that we have the documents on Nicholson
We do.
to
Yeah, it's in the
review.
packet.
Tom, to jump off of your comment, I think to summarize our last meeting was we felt comfortable approving the 25,000 as has been matching our precedent in previous requests, and then had also understood that there was kind of earlier conversations that maybe had suggested that we would be willing to go up to 50,000, which the committee at that time didn't understand how we would be able to kind of move past that to add the additional 25,000, either procedurally or precedent wise. So we wanted to separate the two, go ahead and approve partially the 25,000 at last month and then this month to understand both. Are there any additional budget asks that we are planning to request as we kind of, Tom, to your point, are looking forward to the rest of the pipeline and how we can spread our money appropriately between them? So I guess I would be curious if we've made any asks, or have there been any conversations about a overall budget increase, or are we working with what we have for the remainder of the year?
Well, it sounds like per these documents, we've got the additional 50, right? So we have 100 now for 2021. That's
Correct.
accurate?
We have 100, and then we've committed 25 to the Cohatch project.
So in our packet, and I'm just tapping off of this, what everybody's saying here, but in our packet, we've got a $38,000 request and a $25,000 request, essentially, for the other new and old business projects that I think, one of which, the Tipsy Mermaid, is down the pipeline enough to, I think, be part of this conversation. And then the Nicholson would be something I'd be curious to learn more about. So that right there means we've got, essentially $60,000 that could go elsewhere to rehabilitate facades. And if we only leave 50, is that the right move? So I'm just curious, do we, I also wasn't there last week, but I do understand that, we said up to 25,000 based on our comments. So, what if we agree to a number that, justifies giving it to Cohatch because of the benefits of the project, but also leaves enough for us to feel like we can at least accommodate the two that we have in our pipeline?
And that was the lead of what my question is that we know that we have two other pieces in the pipeline, how we best use our funds to serve the community. So I just have a question from there, that if we have somewhere around $63,000 at an ask with two other projects, and we go a full 25 more, that puts us at $98,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the numbers that I have right now for the Nicholson project, which we haven't discussed yet, is approximately 37,000. That's just rounding up. And the Tipsy Mermaid, we have at 38,520. So those two together are $75,313.
Where are you seeing the 37,000 for Nicholson?
From their application, they have a construction budget in there of $91,983 for the existing building. And so I took that times 40% and got $36,793.
Okay, I'm looking at a packet in our. Oh, you're looking at 91,000. Okay, their total construction budget. They put in their total estimated cost of rehab 76.6 in their application. So that's where I'm seeing a different number. But they actually says the grant request $25,824. So their application is different from their construction.
Their budget number.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess what we would do there is just basically make sure that their 91.9 is actually associated with facade grant, solely, and not anything else going on in that rehabilitation. So I guess that's another question there, is what's the real ask from Nicholson and how much do we need to leave behind? But again, I think for me personally, the Tipsy Mermaid plays a bigger role. It should at least have funds available for that conversation to continue the way it started. And then the Nicholson could be a conversation where let's make sure we leave a reasonable amount for them to have a conversation.
So
Right.
I have a question with the Nicholson grant, since that is in the very initial stages, is that something that would be likely to be, I just don't know how quickly it will move. Is that something that they would for sure want this year, or would that lapse into next year? And also, in terms of precedent, is there ever a certain amount paid in one year and then something else paid in the next year? Or does each project have to be fully funded in 1 year?
Yeah, so I think to answer that, my impression is that the Nicholson project is moving forward. They're currently trying to get other town approvals at this time to continue to move forward. So I think the funding request would be for this year. David, I don't know that you guys have ever approved a certain amount 1 year and then approved an additional amount the next year when funds were available. Has that happened before?
I'm not sure exactly what the language of the approval was, but the Lions Club project spanned 2 years. But I don't remember if were two separate approvals or not, or if it was just one approval that then drew funds from 2 years.
Yeah, on that one, I think we carried over money from 1 year to the next for them that was unused, and then added that to the following year's total, so that when it was time to fund, we had enough when they applied for final approval.
And that's my recollection as well. This group has historically always made its decisions based upon known funding availability, just like what we did with the Lions Club.
Yeah. And so just to kind of stick to, what our standard and our rules are, with the maximum cap of $25,000 per project, that allows us to fund multiple projects. And so if we look at like the Nicholson project and the Tipsy Mermaid project, if you cap those at 25,000, which is, what, we say we will do, then that's a $50,000 ask. And if we grant the Cohatch project another 25,000, that would leave the 50,000 available for the Nicholson project and the Tipsy Mermaid project as well, if we wanted to, set the cap at 25,000.
May I ask, and this may be just me not being aware of this, but why we are making a special exception or approaching a special exception for Cohatch rather than, Tipsy Mermaid, for example, which both appear to be over the $25,000 ask?
Yeah, I think that it's a culmination of several different things. One being the importance of that building and it being vacant for so long and having a hard time trying to find an appropriate user for that. And then just kind of the overall requirement for bringing that up to a usable state for a new user. has a higher cost for the existing construction than a typical project in the village would have. And so their 40% actually comes out to be more like $65,000. And so it's kind of a matter of proportions, right? That's a bigger project, bigger cost, you know. It would make sense that that would then kind of qualify for consideration for additional funding. And then secondly, at the beginning of that project, when we were meeting with them, we did not have any other projects in the pipeline, and we had not had any projects in the pipeline really for a year. And in discussions with them, there was talk about being able to get the full $50,000 for their project. And so there wasn't a firm commitment to that, but there was discussion about it right from the very beginning.
Is there any way that we intend to document kind of our, you know, if we move in this direction, our general attitude toward the proportion? It seems like that's maybe the most defensible item in this, is that the proportion of getting this up to a usable building is just a higher dollar amount, and that we are maybe intending, it seems like our attitude is intending to allocate our budget toward that. Is there any way that we can document that for ourselves in the future, so that if should this arise, or we remember exactly why we sort of made an exception in this instance, or maybe that we intend to? It seems like the general attitude is moving that direction.
Well, I think that it is going to take a little more discussion, but at the same time, it was, I think, as Todd mentioned, after having no activity for 2 years or so, then all of a sudden we have a budget, and Cohatch came along, and then right after that, 2 other projects, or at least one other project that's seriously in the pipeline, and the other one will most likely be as well. So I think our intention was at that time is to use the money as best we possibly can as stewards of the money that's allotted. And so now that we have 2 other projects, I think we have to pause for a minute and really look at how we can use our $100,000, at least in my opinion, how we use the $100,000 to that ends up overall being the best use of the money.
Right. And at this time, we're not aware of any other projects coming up this year, but it doesn't mean one won't appear. But we're all pretty well connected to that area. Is anybody aware of any rumors of any projects coming up at all? No.
I do not know of anything on the business district right now, but as we look at what we have presently, I'm just not sure if we're ready to fund Cohatch another $25,000 right now, in my opinion, until we have some better idea of the budgets on the other 2 projects. So that if in culmination of all 3 projects, we decide that we can go not 40%, but 30% or over the 25 amount, and we want to fund more of the project, I think we should be able to look at it in that way. Not saying that one project is more important than the other, but just where they fall in from a budgetary standpoint and the money that we have.
Yeah, so almost like an equal percentage of eligible construction costs for each one. So for instance, if it turns out that we hit $100,000 by going, 33% for every project or something like that, that would be one way of doing it, where all 3 projects get the same percentage of their ask, would be an option.
Going back to your original explanation, Todd, where you were talking about the relative, what, I don't want to say relative, but the importance of trying to save the building, the Cohatch, I guess we'll call it the Cohatch building now, but the church. I do feel that is such a remarkable place in the village that it does hold special importance to help do whatever we can to preserve that. And as you say, when you're working with a historic building, there are a lot of hoops to jump through to make it usable and still preserve the facade. So I do think that I would hate for the project to be somehow not be able to come to fruition if we can't help fund that.
Well, we presently are helping fund it.
Right.
But I just I just feel that we have at this point, and obviously we are we have the same concerns of preserving the church. But I think within this committee and what is responsible, that of what we do with the funds needs to be looked at from not an emotional side of restoring the building. That's not our business in this. I don't think in this committee. I think our business is to be prudent with our funds. And we obviously are in favor of and want the Cohatch project. We want all three to be very successful in the village. So I kind of tend to agree with Todd that we, in my opinion, I don't think we're ready to fulfill additional funding for Cohatch at this day until we know what is going on with the other projects. I think it's important for us to be good stewards of the money that we have.
Yeah.
Are we able to push this conversation until after we talk about Nicholson? Because I just breezed through the application and I personally feel a lot of it is exterior payment for the new addition and a lot of the kind of reworking of the structure. I mean, if we were to strictly say, what are we accommodating for the existing structure and the facade rehabilitation, I think that number dramatically drops, but that's to be determined as we dive into that one. And so I looked at that and I just think, okay, if we set aside any amount of money, 25 or less, we're going to be able to help them and we should help them. I just want to make sure we quantify that correctly after looking at it. But then Tipsy Mermaid, I think we all agreed the first time we reviewed that, we want that to go and we feel that number is reasonable and we feel that they're asking for only what they can ask for. I don't know. I could agree to an amount less than $25,000 today if that satisfied Cohatch and we all got happy with it. So somewhere between 10 or 15 and call it, satisfied. We've given them above and beyond the 25 to allow them to do a little bit larger project. We've kept the money we want for Tipsy Mermaid and we've kept something available for Nicholson or anyone else who comes our way, I guess, somewhere in that $20,000 range to close the year out with somebody.
Yeah, so go ahead, Carol.
I like that idea, and maybe we should continue through the agenda and look at those numbers. And even if we want to wait till next month to make a decision on a dollar amount, I'm fine with that. And I don't in any way mean to demean any of the other projects. I think Tipsy Mermaid will be a wonderful addition to downtown, and goodness knows we need. I love having the idea of having an orthodontist right in the village. Our granddaughter would just walk over there even during COVID to get her adjustments. It was really nice to have that local.
Yep. So it sounds like there's kind of not a consensus on how much additional funding there should be for the Cohatch project at this time because of unknowns related to other projects. because we haven't discussed those other projects fully yet to even know what our approval of those might be. So if we were to, let's say, take a vote for additional funding for Cohatch now, it sounds like we might get approval for amount less than $25,000. However, if we wait and discuss the other projects and determine what it is we might actually be funding there may be more of money available for Cohatch if we vote later today or next month. Does that sound kind of like a summary?
I think it does to me.
Okay. And then so Tim, I'll ask you if you would like us to, propose an amount and vote on it now, or wait until the end of this meeting or next month when we know more about the other projects where we might be more comfortable approving a larger amount. Oh, you're still on mute, Tim.
I was just saying that it was a good question. I'm looking for it to see if there's any of our Cohatch owner on the call actually, but I didn't see anybody here. I hear what you guys are saying about the consideration of other projects. I think it's fair. It's considerate of the funding that's available, for the community. So, I would say in that spirit, I'm okay and fine with, you guys looking through to make sure that you have, enough resources to share. I don't think we're in a position to to want to ask for all the money, upfront for this project. And obviously we already got approved for the 25,000 last month, which we're very grateful, for. And so, I would say, go ahead and look at other projects to see where they stand. And, and if you feel comfortable that you have enough, money left, funding left, for the Cohatch, that would be great. The Cohatch definitely, the scale of the project definitely would be quite a bit bigger than some other project. I would assume, we are going to fully sprinkler the building, to upgrade it, so that it's going to be safe. We're going to put in a lot of money and to build out the interior to make it really usable and really increase and intensify the occupancy of the space. We also, our owner also pay a lot of money to actually rent another property just for the parking, so that we can actually provide enough parking for the projects. I forgot exactly what's the amount of the investment. I think it's well over 2 million, if not more, for this project. So that's definitely something that I would like you guys to consider. Also, the impact of the project. So.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. Yeah, we do recognize that the scope of that project is much larger. Our portion of that is, strictly the exterior of the existing building, but yes, it is a large building, and the budget for that portion that we cover is a large ask and a bigger scope of work than a normal project. So we definitely recognize that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys consider, to go above, the 25,000 that you guys normally would like to cap at. So I do appreciate that.
Yep. All right, great. Any more discussion on that before we move on?
No, thank you for having the discussion. I thought it was important for us to have.
Yep, absolutely.
Being that it's a business item, do we need to make a motion to push the item to after review, or maybe even to next month, depending on the time?
So I think the best personally would be to push it to next month, because we will know a lot more about these other projects by then. I'm afraid if we just push it to the end of this meeting, we may not still have a clear idea of what the other projects might entail.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think I understood Tim correctly, that he would prefer that we have that opportunity to look at the other two, so that if, um, and also to your suggestion, Todd, that if we approved $10,000 today, had we waited, he may have gotten 25. So I think it's fair to all parties, and I appreciate Tim wanting to take the time to let us review our dollars and then be able to come back to him. I appreciate that, Tim. Thank you.
Yes, I would agree that the waiting would not be to their detriment.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good-
so
good plan.
a motion to continue this discussion till next month.
I move to continue this discussion until our next month's meeting.
All right, a second on that.
I second it.
All right, Roger, roll call.
Yes, sir. Mr. Roush?
Recused.
Yes, that's correct. Mr. Heron?
Yay.
Ms. Mullet?
Yay.
Ms. Weber?
Yay.
Mr. Rotman?
Yay.
Mr. Castellini?
Yay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Tim. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
Thank
See
you,
you next
Tim.
month.
All right, next item of business is the ZARC boundaries. To kind of go back in time a little bit, we've been talking about revising the boundaries for quite some time as the village seems to expand further to the south, and kind of the gateway to Zionsville, and the village itself has moved further to the south. And then secondly, the current way that it is written is very vague and states, businesses that are within or contiguous to the boundary wasn't very clearly defined. So our goals were to look at expanding the boundaries to the south, as well as to clearly better define the boundaries so there aren't so many ambiguities or things that are up for just up for, not clearly defined, having it be up in the air and not clearly defined. So that it's kind of a two-part process. One was to update the written definition, and then the second part was to create a map that would coincide with that. To start with the written definition, when we talked about this several months ago, David, you had taken some notes about how we might change the language about what qualifies. Do you happen to have that with you?
I don't have that in front of me, but the primary, I'm going from memory, the primary point is that we adjusted a couple of things. One is that as it exists today, the boundary description includes any business use in or immediately adjacent to the village business district. So by adjusting the boundaries, what we're trying to do is just be more deliberate about capturing those areas that are either across the street or that are actually, not in the business district, but are commercial uses. And a good example of that is our third applicant in the history of this program was Claghorn's Flooring Building. And that old mill building was actually a business use, but a grandfathered business use in the village business district. So it's really a cleanup thing. There's no obviously program to extend, the boundaries or the program to, residential uses. And then that brings me to the second point, which is, again, going from memory, the program, I think, talks about business. I think it states business uses. And our intention, I think the program's intention is more clearly stated by saying non-single family residential uses, I believe is the way it's written. And what that does then is that clears up any doubt about not-for-profits particularly. We did fund the Lions Club. Early in the program, there was a discussion with Sullivan Muntz that did not ultimately go through the process, but it would just basically create a very clear line that the program, it relates to effectively non-single family, uses. So that whether it's for-profit or not is no longer in question.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it was non 1 and 2 family dwellings.
Okay.
So
yeah.
it wouldn't include the duplexes as well. But if it was an apartment with 3 or more, it would qualify. So anything that's not a single family house or a duplex that is within the boundary would be eligible.
Correct. And I might make a quick note that just for edification, not good or bad or indifferent, but there are actually, I believe, a small handful of single family residences that are currently in our boundary as it exists today. Not very many. They, of course, would not be eligible. I believe up on Poplar and Elm Street, I think there's a couple homes that I believe still fall within the boundary. But so that's neither here nor there, just a point of reference.
Yeah. So, David, do you think you'd be able to get those notes from a couple months back where we changed the language and get that over to Wayne and Roger prior to our next meeting so that we could approve the new language?
I think it was actually in the package that we looked at a couple of months ago. I can try to pull it up here.
The meeting minutes, you think?
No, it was we did a cartoon that had that language
Okay.
included on it, I believe. You're gonna test my memory now.
Are we still using the term contiguous, or are we just calling the boundary the boundary?
I believe the intention is to call the boundary the boundary, because it should lasso any and all
the previous intentions of the word
uses.
Contiguous, right?
Yeah, and it removes any sort of doubt about contiguousness, for lack of
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have my notes from that meeting. It would have been on the March 23rd meeting. And I'll read what the existing boundary definition is. All commercial use properties in or immediately adjacent to the VBD zoning district. Our proposed new language was all non 1 and 2 family dwellings in the area indicated. And then that way it does allow for nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. It gets rid of the definition of commercial and instead says anything that's not a single or duplex that's within the boundary itself would be eligible.
I'm recalling a comment in one of these letters that we received, and I'm hoping somebody can refresh my memory. Was there somebody worried about someone taking a single or 2 family dwelling and converting it into a business because it now falls within this boundary, and then all of a sudden neighbors have more businesses next door versus, a concern of stretching conversions into the residential district? Was that something that was mentioned in one of these letters? I'm just not finding the note.
Yes, I think that's a legitimate worry about some of the people who would fall into the new area.
And Steve, on that note, I think that the way that I've been reading some of the concerns and hearing them is that, does this move incentivize adjustments and changes from single family use to, special use for businesses or commercial, I think, as it was originally stated. I think
Okay.
as I'm reading it, that seems to be the general concern, is, are we incentivizing that?
Correct. And we definitely have no intention of doing that whatsoever. So that would get to the second topic, which would be to clearly define the boundaries such that it doesn't include any of those properties.
Yep.
And this is Dave. I would not disagree with Carrie, your read. And I don't think that there's any certainly desire or agenda to remove a obscurity and replace it with another one. So if my comment would be, I have two or three, I guess. One comment would be, if we decided to zigzag, for lack of a better word, the boundary, particularly along 2nd Street, that's obviously the most sensitive area, then, that would certainly clear that up, any question there up, I believe, at least. There is one very doubtful property area that's at the corner of, I think, Hawthorne and 2nd, where the heating and cooling company used to be. The house was demolished. It was a commercial use. We wouldn't want that to be incented to come back, obviously, as a commercial use. It's zoned residential and there's no active use, but as we all know, the more opportunity there is for interpretation, the more difficult that becomes. So, particularly along 2nd Street, if zigzagging the boundary to follow the actual entitled uses clears that up, that's no agenda from, certainly, I don't think, from this committee, but I won't speak to it. I would extend that one step further and say, then I believe, I'm going to pull it up, along Poplar Street. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if maybe it actually doesn't, but I would just suggest we would go look around the other edges and make sure that we're consistent all the way around at that point. That if there are some residential properties that are captured within the existing boundary, that we would just remove them too.
In our present boundaries as of today, we have none of these concerns, correct? Are they not the same boundaries they've had since the inception of the program?
They are the same boundaries since the inception, and I think there's maybe one or two single-family homes within the current boundary. I'm not sure. I don't have that document in front of me. But if there are, obviously they've never been entitled to be, nor would they be incented to be part of the program.
I'm wondering if there is a solution. It seems like the inciting event to get us to explore the boundaries, and I haven't been a part of the full history of that, but was to be able to help kind of the businesses south and more clearly define where we can help distribute our funds. It feels, I guess I don't feel that the language contiguous to is necessarily problematic. Maybe if we can improve that language. So I do think it, at a glance, pulling into within the official boundaries, residentially zoned areas, feels like a deviation. And I would just want to understand that clearly. And if we can tighten up our language around what is a contingent existing business use so that we can help those, grandfathered businesses help upkeep, our intent of this is to help upkeep and beautify the village. If we can tighten that language, I'm wondering, could that achieve this with addressing some of the concerns of, are we incentivizing businesses in a residentially zoned area.
I feel like if we don't, if we keep the language that says contiguous to, the incentive for somebody to take a property that's contiguous to our boundary and turn it into commercial use is there. And
see,
so
yeah.
by taking the word contiguous out and clearly defining the boundary, there's no gray area and there would be no incentivizing anybody nearby. I guess that
Right.
would be my concern.
Well, with that being said, again, now that I'm realizing this, our existing language and our existing boundary along 2nd Street has contiguous language tied to it, and the new
Correct.
boundary would not. And so that same empty parcel David was talking about, if I opened a business and got the town and went through the processes to make a business on that parcel, I would be contiguous to our current boundary and therefore could ask for funds. Or if I move this line over and don't make it contiguous, that doesn't change that situation on that empty parcel, current day or new boundary line. And maybe that's unclear to those reading this, that we're encompassing something that we once weren't in a line, but we included it by saying contiguous. So if I were to go through the process is to open a business on the west side of 2nd Street, then in both cases, I'd be able to ask for funds.
As the line is currently drawn, but I don't feel like we're going to approve the boundary as, currently drawn. I think we're going to make some modifications to it.
And I agree with that move. I'm just saying, like, I guess I wasn't picking up on that moments ago, just like the realization that nothing has really changed. We're sort of just encompassing and not saying contiguous, but it's being picked up as if we're changing something.
Right. I think,
Todd, if you don't mind, I'd like to quickly summarize in a sense how this all started and why. It started that as South Main Street was coming online, we knew that all the new construction happening on South Main Street we would never participate in, but we had looked at extending the boundary initially to 106th Street, solely in looking to the future as that being a gateway area into the village. And on the east side of Main Street at 106th is an existing building owned by Bob Harris, I believe, that if they ever decided that they wanted to enhance those buildings, that we would want to be able to help participate in funding, because that was a gateway to the town. That was our main intent on extending the boundaries to be able to capture the opportunity to be of assistance if that east corner was ever going to be developed, or not developed, but enhanced. So then once the maps started to draw, everything went crazy. And so instead of pushing this, I feel it's a rather simple matter of changing some wording and really being defined on how we go. I don't think we need to extend past the 106th Street, because anything after that is fallow land and there's nothing, and it would be new construction. So the intent originally was to try to capture down to 106th Street so that we would be able to be in a position to assist the Harris building area to make it more pleasing as a gateway into the village. It was, and then with our present boundary lines, we've how many years we've been in existence, Dave? 15 or better?
2009, 12, 13th, this 13th year, yeah.
We've never had an issue with our boundaries, and we've obviously have enhanced a lot of the village and helped a lot of businesses. And there's never been a concern by any of the residents as to whether we were incentivizing someone to take a residential and turn it into commercial. So where I think all this has come from is we aren't really good at drawing maps. That's where this all comes from. We just aren't good map drawers. So, so in my opinion, so that everyone feels comfortable with why we wanted to extend our boundaries and for what purposes. Our purposes were very intent on being able to continue to serve the community the best way we can. So residents have no fear. We are protecting you as well. We have no concerns. We don't want to get involved with any sort of residential or personal projects. That's not the intent of this. And so I move to table this.
There is a question. I think I saw a question. I'll defer to Todd on this, but it looked like maybe somebody from the public was interested in speaking.
Okay, I can't see the comments on my screen here. So I think it would be good to open it up if there are members of the public that would like to speak on it. And I'll hand it over to Roger to coordinate how that will happen.
Thank you. If there are members of the public that would like to speak, I know we have one here in the room present that would like to, but if online, if you would like to speak, if you could please raise your hand, and you can do that by going to the bottom of your screen and clicking on the icon that says raise hand. We do have Heather Lusk that would like to speak. So I will promote her to panelist.
All right, Heather, it looks like you have joined us, but you are on mute. If you could unmute.
There we go.
Yep. All right, we can hear you.
Terrific. Thank you. And I appreciate the discussion and the information surrounding this. As VRA president, I don't know if I have to list my name and address like you do in a general meeting.
If you could please, yes.
Okay, certainly. This is Heather Lusk. I live at 285 West Hawthorne Street, and I am president of the Zionsville Village Residents Association. Having heard from members of the VRA and some concerns from residents, I think you all summarized quite well some of the issues, and that is primarily that there is a concern that there will be an incentive with the changed boundaries for people who did not previously have a business in a residence to convert a business to a residence. I think while the zigzagging concept isn't ideal from a map perspective and might be messy, that seems like a better solution than including residential homes in this. I do certainly appreciate your comment about the contiguous properties already potentially making people more interested in converting something even along 3rd Street that could be considered contiguous. So thank you very much for this discussion this morning.
Thank you, Heather.
Yes, thank you. I would kind of piggyback on that and say that once we started looking at the new boundary, as Tom mentioned, we noticed that our language was kind of vague and included properties that, shouldn't be included in it. And that was kind of another reason for trying to redefine the boundary, was to really not have it open to have any of these residences converted over to commercial properties. So I think we're on board with that same goal. And that would be one of the attempts here, is to try to clarify and not have that be an issue.
And Todd, to that point, Heather, thank you for your comment. I think also this opportunity for clarity, we've not even kind of conversationally addressed what that also could help clarify, kind of north of Poplar Street and kind of on the northern boundaries. So I think this is an exciting time to clarify that. Whether we are able to fully handle it today or at a future meeting, I think we're kind of getting around the crux of what the goal is.
Yeah.
With that, there are no other speakers online, but we do have one present that would like to make comment. If you please introduce yourself and give your address.
My name is John Townsley. I live at 305 West Pine Street. I've lived in the village since 1978. Being at Third and Pine, I'm obviously very sensitive to the issue of any commercialization to the west of Second Street. In fact, the original reason I joined the VRA was because of a proposed variance on the house that was at the corner of Second and Pine. That was going to be turned into a bookstore. The house next to it, the yellow house, which is one of the oldest structures in the village, was going to become a parking lot. I have been practicing law since 1976, I guess. A lot of that was zoning up until the time I moved my office here to the village. And I will tell you, I appreciate the comment that you're not interested in the further commercialization of the residential, but I can absolutely guarantee you that those people looking for commercial properties are interested, even if you aren't. As a zoning lawyer, what I found was it was always, perhaps not always, but oftentimes less expensive to have a commercial use go into a residential property. I've done a number of variances and rezoning for people who would start out as a small shop, for instance, a bookshop or whatever, would look over and say, gee, that's just such a wonderful little property, and I could take that and I can turn that into XYZ. Ironically, a lot of times those uses would not be in existence within a year or two afterwards, and somebody else would come in. By moving the boundary to the west side of Second Street, I think you're not taking sufficient notice of the comprehensive plan, which, as I understand it, calls for that to be residential property to the west, business to the east. So again, as an attorney, what I would do is I would get up there and I would argue that whatever the comprehensive plan may say, it's obviously recognized in the boundaries of the Zionsville Architectural Review Committee that these properties along Second Street are to be commercial. In addition, as a side note, I recall the Sycamore Flats remonstrance. I was part of that. And Albers, the Bentley dealership, were particularly sensitive to commercialization around them. Became aware that they have property in Whitestown, and if things become too crowded, Bentley of Zionsville could become Bentley of Whitestown. That is not something that I think would be to the betterment, doing anything which might at some point induce Albers to move the Bentley dealership, which has been there forever, would not be in the best interest of our community. Finally, I would say that the vigor of the residential properties, the village residents, should be perhaps not as important, ZARC, as the status of the commercial properties, but they work hand in hand. On the weekends, particularly, you would be absolutely amazed at the number of people who walk down Pine Street, who walk down Hawthorne, who look at the homes that are in those areas. And I also lived over on Maple Street when I first moved here as well. Those things draw people to the commercial uses that have been established. And so I think it's important to maintain a boundary between the two so that when we, the residents, make what is probably the largest investment of our lives, that we're assured that the value of that property as a residence, as a place you can raise kids, is maintained. So I would suggest to you that a hard boundary, rather than one that contains the word contiguous, at least along Second Street, is the best way to maintain the residential properties. And so I would propose that the boundary you presently have between Second Street, instead of having the contiguous part of that, which would encourage people to cross the street be eliminated. We simply have what I would call a hard line. So the people who buy to the east know that they can have commercial properties, and people like myself who buy to the west of that know that we'll have residential properties, as opposed to you see it throughout the communities. For instance, when you go over to Broad Ripple, the canal, there was an area, a neighborhood over there that over the years has been transformed from residences into commercial. It's just one of those things that's inevitable. And whatever your intentions are, there are always going to be people who think that the greatest thing since crunchy peanut butter will be to take that old house and turn it into something that's commercial. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. And appreciate your letter and all the research that you had done on it as well, and giving us some of the history too. That really does help us with our discussion. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I would also like to add to that, thank you, John, but I think also in our conversations today prior to you speaking that you noticed that we have the exact same concerns. And that was the main conversation points about changing our boundary lines and redefining and getting rid of contiguous. So I hope you leave today understanding that that is the entire intent of the committee, is to address your concerns and those concerns of the residents in the village. And also that we certainly do not want to open the door to anything that of that nature. So feel safe that you are in good hands.
So in order for people to feel comfortable and be able to not worry about this anymore, what I would like to see is that next month we have the new written description and the new boundary proposed for us to discuss. Probably not be able to approve it next month because I think it needs more input, not only from us, but also from concerned residents as well. But I think we should not, table this to a later date, but rather come back next month with the final definition and the boundary for a distinct discussion on each property and the exact boundary itself. Does that sound good?
That makes sense.
Okay. And what I've heard today is that there is some work that needs to be looked at around Poplar Street for what might be commercial or residential there. And then the second item that I've heard was not jumping to the west side of 2nd Street. And then the third item I heard was not going south of 106th Street. So I think the Poplar Street area, the concern would be we just need to look at that and make sure we've got that drawn correctly to not include any residential properties. As far as not jumping over 2nd Street, I think there's kind of two options we've heard today. One is that we do put the line right down the middle of 2nd Street. The second idea was that if there is an existing non-single family or duplex residence that exists on the west side of 2nd Street, that we would zigzag the border to include that, with the idea that it is already a commercial property. And if they wanted to do improvements, we would want to be able to help them improve it and make it more attractive or an appropriate business, and be able to utilize our funding to do that and our input into what would be an appropriate design would be available at that time. So discussion from the group on cutting down the middle of 2nd Street versus zigzagging around commercial. You guys could weigh in on that.
This is Dave. I think we are doing ourselves a disservice not to put the lasso around the commercial uses. So I think you need to catch the telephone building in Sullivan Munts. And then I'm pretty confident the old parsonage next to the church on Poplar is in the district, but it's a residential use. So,
Dave, I would agree with you. I feel that our opportunity to clarify but also beautify those existing structures and offer some design direction that keeps in spirit with the village is an opportunity that we should consider. And as much as I love straight lines, zigzag, and this will be painful to look at a zigzagged map, I think it's something we should seriously consider.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that if we did include those non-residential properties on the west side of Second Street, the goal would not be to encourage more non-residential over there, but rather to take those buildings that currently are lacking in character and design and be able to allow us to have input on their beautification down the road should those owners choose to do that. Is that the intent?
I believe so. And I believe that since this is such a kind of pivot point, especially along the Second Street sort of area, a pivot point between commercial and residential, to instead of having fringe commercial properties that may be less cared for, or less, I shouldn't say cared for, maybe less funded in their facade improvements. This actually could give us an opportunity to really strengthen that, which would benefit both the residents and the commercials in that transition between residential and commercial.
I had a question also, and I think the discussion was long enough ago that I don't know whether I'm remembering correctly, but when the original discussion was to go to 106th, and then was there not just at that time some discussion about the old, what was it, the Pizza Inn or whatever the building is that is now a distillery? Is that why we jogged it south that far, in case that building would want some facade improvements?
That was just in conversation. I don't think that we actually we talked about taking it that far, but that conversation was backed off rather quickly when the Hotel Tango was able to find other fundings through the town.
but the boundary that's in front of us does propose going down there and grabbing that. Because we all know that Hotel Tango didn't really do a lot as it relates to the exterior, and there may or may not be a future opportunity, as well as the properties on the east side of South Main Street. So that's why it goes down and grabs that. But that was the impetus, Carol, yes.
And I think the thought was that 50 years down the road, there will be some commercial buildings that have been built within these proposed enlarged boundaries, which will need some renovations. And we would want to be able to, have input into those, since that is the southern gateway into the village. And so I think that's why we grab those properties, even when there's not something there now that would qualify. The thought was that down the road there might be, and if we were going to redefine the boundaries, let's do that now. There's definitely not a current need for it, but it was kind of thinking long term to not have to go through this discussion again. So does the group want to keep it as we had it drawn on March 23rd that goes past 106th Street, or are other people in support of stopping it at 106?
I suggest we respect the same idea we have north and west of there, and that's jog around the residential parcels. And if something changes in the future, then a map can change in the future. But if we want to include the Hotel Tango building, then we follow that line and jog around it and come back up. And We don't wrap Taylor's, the residents north of Taylor's, and we don't wrap the residents north of the Harris building. So I would find confusion in knowing that we did and did not follow that mentality in certain parts of our boundary.
Right. I would agree with that.
I would suggest that our boundaries are just on the east side of Zionsville Road.
Just head straight down and jog around Hotel Tango, maybe.
Well,
And
that we
And then do nothing on the west side.
yeah, that we have our boundaries do not include anything on the west side of the street.
Well,
Except for
the B shops are actually in the VBD district, if I'm not mistaken, so they are included. But you're saying exclude Taylor, which is fine.
Yeah, I'm saying that the west side stops at 106th Street.
Gotcha.
yeah. So we would still grab the B shops. Okay.
Right.
Right, and then east of Zionsville Road, it would go down to what we showed on March the 23rd, which is the Hotel Tango property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we can make that update. But in regards to the 2nd Street, I'd like John Towsley, if you could, to come back up and talk about whether we zigzag around current business uses or not, having some history in the area as well as some professional experience, what he thinks potential ramifications for that might be, or if that might actually work out.
On the second side of the street closest to where I am, you look at the AT&T building, which honestly, it's hard to imagine that being turned into anything because of the way it's configured. You can't even get into the building. I think that if something's done, it would have to be pretty dramatic. And because of that, I guess that on the AT&T building, I would rather see that as an issue to be addressed at a later time. Again, my experience in zoning is once you cross 2nd Street, 3rd Street is the next natural boundary. 3rd Street is only 3 homes away from me, and they're not very large lots. So then looking at the other property, the Russell property has an interesting heritage. That was originally the telephone interchange. According to one of my neighbors, when I lived over on Maple Street, when I first moved here, there were 2 ladies who worked the switchboard in the Russell building. And obviously that one was left to go fallow. There's a terrific family that lives next door to that. Plus the sensitivity to whether Albert stays in Zionsville or moves to Whitestown. I just would be very hesitant to take any step which would commit you in either direction because of the sensitivities of the development of the property. Lord knows, none of us on either side of the line wants to go through another Sycamore Flats. I would be in favor, from an attorney standpoint, the thing that would discourage me from crossing the line is a hard boundary, not a zigzag, particularly if it involves any sort of property that could be turned into a commercial use. So I hear what you're saying on the zigzag, and on the face of it, it sounds like a good compromise. But looking down the road and based on my experience, I think, again, you're inviting commercialization. I think that is a step that should be reserved to the town council when it designs the comprehensive plan, which at this point does use a clear line down 2nd Street. One side village business, the other side is residential. So I do sincerely appreciate your discussion, your concern. But I think it is better just to leave that line right down the center of the street if someone later comes in and has a wonderful plan for the telephone building or the Russell property, then address it at that time rather than try to anticipate it at this time. So that's what I have to say.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, with that, if there's any other comments, let me know. If not, we will work on having the definition and the boundary clearly defined next month for further discussions. Motion to table this till next month.
I move to table it until.
We got Tom with the first, Carol with the second. Roger, roll call.
Steve Heron,
Yay.
Carol Mullet,
Yay.
Carol Weber,
Yeah.
Todd Rotman,
Yay.
Tom Castellini,
Yay.
David Roush.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right, next item on old business is 135 South Main Street, Tipsy Mermaid. If the applicant would like to present, please.
We do have, obviously, Mr. Roush is involved, but also Darren Lanish of his office, and I'm promoting Darren.
And I'll just make a note that I'm assuming David Roush will recuse himself from the committee for this project.
That is correct.
All right. So Darren, we are showing that your microphone is muted right now.
Okay, I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, this is Dave. Let me jump in. I'll give you sort of a high level, and then Darren can fill in blanks as need be. Obviously, we presented this to the committee with the application a month ago, I guess, or so. At this point in time, today we are in front of you to seek approval of the grant application as originally submitted with a minor modification or a modification that occurred between the time of the submittal and today. That modification really has to do with some equipment accommodation on the rear of the property and does not involve the facade specifically. So we can get into the details of that if necessary. But I would also say that we met with Tom and Todd as the liaisons a couple of weeks ago on the property, also with Sherry Jenkins, the operator, who I believe is on the call as well if she needs to answer anything. So in sum, we are continuing to renovate, rehabilitate the existing 135 South Main Street building, augmenting it with a couple of very minor additions to repurpose it as a appropriate restaurant use and reposition the property to be a nice, vibrant placeholder on Main Street for many years to come. The existing home has a lot of good bones. It's just got a lot of opportunity for improvement and refinement, and those items are all in the packet from a month or so ago. Effectively, the status of the project is that construction drawings are advanced to the point of getting permitting. At the moment, we did receive development plan approval on Monday night, and we'll be planning with all good intentions to start construction before July of this year. Sorry. We are in the process of obtaining final bids on the project. So the grant application that's being requested, the numbers of about 96,000 and I believe 38,000 and change for the actual ask are budget numbers that we do not anticipate exceeding. So our request would be for an approval, and understanding the conversation that occurred earlier today, and appreciate that. Our ask today would be for approval of an amount up to the grant request of 38,000, and we are optimistic that we will have bids back in the next 2 weeks, and then obviously construction thereafter that will produce numbers that we would like to believe are lower than the amount of the ask. But for today, we would seek approval for the application as it's written. So I think rather than unless the committee wants me to walk through the drawings again, which we did a month or so ago, I think I would just open the floor up for any questions or comments.
So the change, there were no changes to what would be reflected in the facade part.
Good, yes, Carol. So in the packet today are the drawings that reflect what is been permitted and what is being bid at the moment. The substantive change, if you will, or I shouldn't say change, but the refinement is that the east side of the building, which is an addition or a couple of additions actually, and we are actually adding on to it again, has a variety of low slope roofs. And what we have done in final coordination and sort of design refinement is to flatten out part of that roof on the east side, which abuts the alley. It's highly well, it is visible, but it's very much in the back of the building, and I would suspect not going to catch anybody's eye. So that's really the only change as far as the facade treatment, the porch, the accessible walkways, windows, shutters, and all of those elements. They're all very much as they were initially.
And as David mentioned, Tom and I met with David and Darren and Sherry out on the site, walked through the changes they were making, and discussed colors and things like that, which will need to come back to us at a later date for approval for some of that detailing. But we did not have any issues leaving that meeting. So any other discussion on that before we talk about the money aspect of it?
No, I'm pretty clear on it.
Okay. And so my gut on this is because with the Cohatch was asking for more money, but we granted them the 25,000 pending review of other applications, and to be consistent with the initial maximum allowable request being 25,000. I would think that we would do the same thing on this, where we would automatically vote on the 25,000, which is our standard cap, to make sure that they know that they have funding from us, and then probably table the discussion about additional funding until next month, similar to what we did with Cohatch, where we can talk about multiple projects at one time in regards to funding. What do people think about that?
I agree with that thinking. I think it's fair at this time.
I agree too. That seems like a very fair way to handle it. And I certainly think we should move forward with encouraging this project.
I find both projects, Cohatch and Tipsy Mermaid, to be equally important to the village in the future. And as we all know that whatever money we invest in both of these projects, the town will benefit financially for years and years and years to come. So even if we get to the point where we may have to, well, at this point right now, I think that's the best thing to do. Then not knowing exactly what Nicholson is asking for, Karen and I both have tried to guide them to things that we felt within that project would qualify. And I've not seen what the proposal they have right now. But I think at the same time, looking at it, and Steve, from your comments after you were looking at it earlier, their funding request may be less, which will then give us even more money to appropriate to the Tipsy Mermaid and Cohatch. So
yeah, I agree with.
I would move to approve at this date $25,000 for Tipsy Mermaid, and come back in the future for as we have with Cohatch.
I'll second that.
I'll just jump in as the applicant and say I think that's a very healthy and responsible approach. So,
as the applicant, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, we appreciate that. So we've got a motion from Tom to approve $25,000. We've got a second from Carol. Roger, if you could run us through the roll call on that.
Yes, sir. Carol Mullet,
Aye.
Carol Weber,
Yay.
Todd Ruttman,
Yay.
Tom Castellini,
Okay.
and David Roush was recused.
Great. All right. That motion carries. Thank you guys very much. As mentioned in the past and in person on the field visit, we're very excited about this project. We think it'll be a great addition to the village, and we're looking forward to hanging out there eventually. So thank you.
thank you.
Moving on to new business. Steve, did you have something to say?
No, I heard a construction start date. I was curious of a construction completion date, I guess. So I'll talk to David offline.
Well, my
Okay.
crystal ball says toward the end of the year.
Fair enough.
All right, moving on to new business. We've got 95 East Oak Street, Nicholson Orthodontics, and have Roger take over to invite them to present.
Would you like me to give an overview as to other aspects of the project where they are seeking approvals from different boards?
Let's have them present first.
Very good.
And then after they present, before we get into further discussion, Roger will talk to other applications they have with the town.
I am promoting both Lindsay Phipps and Paul Kite to join us. I know there are still some others that are from this project that are available to join, so I will defer to Lindsay and Paul as to if I need to promote anyone else. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to you for an introduction of the project.
Thank you, Roger. Lindsay Phipps with Strongbox Commercial. Address for record is PO Box 288, Zionsville, Indiana 46077. And obviously project being Nicholson Orthodontics. Hopefully everybody has the packet of information that was in front of you with some additional drawings and a schedule and a budget. On the line, as Roger mentioned, we also have Paul Kite with Strongbox, and I believe we have Jerry Williams on the phone from a construction standpoint, if any details are needed from a construction side. And then we also have Jeff DeSmit with Access Architecture on the line, and he can also maneuver through any drawings or answer any meticulous design questions as well. So project overview, obviously, as many of you know, Nicholson Orthodontics has been a long-standing business of operation in the village for many, many years. And he plans to expand and add an addition to the existing structure. Obviously, we do understand that the expansion would be excluded from the facade rehab program. So even though we're showing drawings of what that will look like, we do understand that that expansion would not be under review for today's conversation. We've also got, I know that there are some conversations that were brought up around the budget. Let me kind of go through that a little bit from a higher level. With the expansion and the exterior rehab to the existing structure, we're looking at a total investment of over 1.2 million for this project. So in the last page of your packet, there was an existing structure estimate of 91,000. So just to clarify, that 91,000 is for the building as it consists today. And I know that Tom had also mentioned kind of guiding us a little bit on, in addition to what has been outlined through the facade grant program, on what would be acceptable and would not be acceptable. And we do understand that the roof, if we replace the roof on the existing structure, that would be considered a maintenance item. So we've excluded that line item from the existing budget as it relates to what we would actually be asking for. So that line item of, I believe it's 12,000 and change, has been subtracted from the 91,000. So if you refer to our application, there's a 76,000 estimated dollar for the total rehab of the existing structure. And then 40% of what would be eligible would be $25,824.40. And from a timing perspective, we are looking to start construction hopefully late July, as things have shifted and we work towards Zionsville approvals.
I'm sorry, Lindsay, can you repeat one more time? What was subtracted from the 91,000 that got it to the 76?
That would be the roof line item. So in our budget, we have roofing is $12,132. So that should equate to the 76 on the application.
And
All right, is there any more presentation on behalf of the owners?
Yes, I would like to nominate Jeff DeSmit with Access, if he could share his screen, and we could look at some of the exterior renderings as well.
I'm in the process of promoting Jeff DeSmit.
Good morning.
Good morning.
While Jeff is doing that, this is Paul Kite with offices at 65 East Cedar. If I could give you a little background. So the whole purpose in this is that for those of you that know Jim Nicholson, he's been here in Zionsville, I think, since the mid-'80s, before I was living here, but he's obviously a longtime resident. The goal here is that what Jim wants to do is to improve his facility so that at some point, he's been doing this for 30 some years here in Zionsville. He wants to make sure that whenever he sells his practice or someone else takes over the practice, he wants to make sure that this facility is able to serve Zionsville going forward. The existing building, as you know, is an old home that he's managed to keep going this long, but to continue in the future, he has to do this. Otherwise, it'll end up somewhere else. So it's important for him that this practice stays in Zionsville beyond him. So building a new operatory and the facility to meet current dental and orthodontic practice standards is very important to him. So that's really the purpose behind all this. And with respect to the existing building, we're going to have to replace all of the siding, the windows and everything so that everything is new and matches an existing building. I'm sure the architects in the group will understand the necessity for that. So with that, I'll let Jeff go forward. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so just wanted to give you guys a quick kind of overview of where we're at from a kind of site and a site plan standpoint. So the existing house there on the northeast corner of the property is about 2,000 square feet currently, including both the first and second floor. And then what's being proposed is about a 4,000 square foot addition, which is again a two-story addition that will be on the kind of the south and west side of the site. We're still working through with the other committees in Zionsville, kind of from a parking standpoint and a few of those other things, but from an architectural standpoint, kind of wanted to get in front of you guys to get your feedback on what we have so far and any further direction that we need to go here to get approval. I apologize that we had sent over some updated drawings that I didn't get over to Roger in time, so we have some additional stuff that wasn't in your packet. So hopefully that'll be of some help this morning. From a elevation standpoint, from the existing building, and obviously with the addition, as Paul mentioned, we're essentially doing a complete reskin of the entire thing. The existing building has vinyl siding, vinyl trim, and everything around all of that. As Paul mentioned, replacement from windows, doors, new roofing, just because of the extent that we're kind of tying into the existing building and kind of having a consistent look across all of that. So, from at the top here on this west elevation, this portion of the building is obviously this is the existing building, and then the new addition that we're putting on that goes farther to the south. With the existing building as it is currently kind of being very monotone in nature, we did want to go back and kind of look through some of the rest of the precedent that's in and around this current structures, from a color and texture standpoint, trim standpoint. So what we're going back and proposing is kind of a two-tone scheme where essentially everything that's in the gray that you're seeing is a 8-inch lap siding, and then everything that's kind of above that second floor line for the most part is more of kind of a slate blue color that's in a 4-inch lap siding. There'd be new either cedar or composite trim throughout. That would be around windows, doors, eaves, soffits. That would be white, and then the new roof would be more of kind of a darker kind of brown off gray color. Wanted to show you kind of a quick picture of what this looks like from an existing standpoint, if it'll go forward here. There we go. So you can see the existing building. Again, there's vinyl shutters, vinyl siding throughout. The gutters, siding, again, everything would be replaced, including kind of new, from a new fence standpoint, some updating from the landscaping. Some of those bushes and shrubs and those sort of things are fairly large. So again, back to this kind of two-tone feel. Again, everything else trimmed out in white, with the lower portions of the building being with the 8-inch lap, and then the upper portions in a 4-inch lap siding. This is looking from Oak. You can see the existing kind of parking and grass lot there, and the back side of that building, the lower portion.
Okay.
And then this is that southeast corner with the addition. There'll be kind of two entrances on this side, and then there'll be an entrance on the south side as well. So with that, be more than happy to answer any questions or address any comments that the committee may have.
All right, so does that complete the owner's presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to hand it over to Roger who can talk about the other approvals that are in process for the town of Zionsville in regards to this project.
Thank you, Todd. And this is really just for the board's benefit to understand the different approvals that this project is pursuing. Really, these are nothing out of the ordinary for a development in the village. But really, again, just want to make the board aware. Petitioner has filed for development plan approval, which will be going before the Plan Commission. One aspect of that development plan approval is a waiver or two waivers of one of the Zionsville theme. The property is zoned VBD, Village Business District, and one of the requirements of any new development in the VBD is that the project be developed with the Zionsville theme, which includes different architectural styles, Georgian or colonial, or there's a total of 4 different styles. But the zoning ordinance also takes into account that there are times when developing to those themes may not be appropriate. And so the ordinance does accommodate that and allows for waivers to be requested and possibly granted by the Plan Commission should the Plan Commission deem it worthy. And in this case, those waivers will be requested and required. And again, that is nothing out of the norm, but it is a procedural requirement for the development plan approval. In addition to receiving approval of the development plan from the Plan Commission, because of the size of this proposed addition, the project is required to meet certain parking standards, and they're certain off-street parking standards. And in this case, they are required to provide up to 15 off-street parking spaces. And they have the option of either doing that either on their site, or they can find 15 spaces within 300 feet of the building itself that could be specifically designated for this use. It certainly appears, I know from the site design and the site plan that's been provided, they will not be able to provide that full amount on site. And at this time, it is anticipated that they will be seeking a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals for a reduction in that parking amount that they will provide. From a scheduling standpoint, I spoke with Mr. Kite yesterday afternoon, and this has not been finalized yet, but it certainly appears that they are going to pursue the variance first to hopefully secure a reduction in the required parking from the Board of Zoning Appeals before it is then heard by the Plan Commission. So that is a quick summary and an overview of the other approvals that this project will be required to secure from the town. Be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Roger, for informing us on that.
I have a,
I guess
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. Could the architect please take down his screen so that we could have a full view? Thank you.
Oh, great. Now we got a full view of Tom. Okay, so the first thing that I would want to do is ask the committee members if they're comfortable discussing this project today, knowing that it still needs to get some variances, or do we wait until we know that this project can actually happen before we spend time discussing it? So I just wanted to have that conversation first.
I'd start that conversation with letting y'all know that we are obviously want to help you as much as possible, but until the variances issues have been answered, knowing if you've been on part of this meeting from the beginning, that we're looking how we can fairly look at the budget that we have and use it in the future. So until we know that this is a go, it's really, there's no way we can actually grant any funds today to something that we don't know is a go.
I agree with that. And I think that the presentation was well given, is well defined. I think the budget seems to make sense. Thanks, Lindsay, for walking through why there was a discrepancy between what we saw in the application and this chart. I think that it makes full sense now. And I believe our intention would be to support this as long as it can get all of the other approvals.
And I think that it, with their ask right now is, say around 28, is it? I forget, was it?
It's just over 25, 25.8.
25.8. Knowing that, that will help us have more considerations for the 2 active projects and still be in a position that once you're approved, that we could probably come real close to your ask. And knowing that we'd like to do that, it's, once you have approval, you could probably feel comfortable that that ZARC would be right there with you.
That's great, and we don't have any problem continuing. Hopefully, till it'd probably be July, I think, Roger, before we would July or August, but I guess before we would have full approvals, both from Plan Commission and the BZA. And but it was important to us that we get in front of you guys, present the project, so that you knew that it was something we were looking for. We know that there's a lot of competition for these funds, and I think it's a great thing that what you're doing to promote restoring the village. So we hope to be part of that.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and with your presentation today, because it's where we stand financially for the year. It appears that we will be able to help all 3 projects in a very meaningful way and use our funds with the stewardship that we're given by the town. So I think it's really very, very exciting to have these 3 projects in the village.
I have a couple
I
of
would,
things. Go ahead, Tom.
I would say, first off, I appreciate that you guys are keeping the existing house as part of the project. And it is kind of a little icon on that corner. And I am someone who has had 3 children go there on a regular basis. So very familiar with the building and its condition. So appreciate that. In regards to the financing, obviously today we're not guaranteeing financing of the project nor a certain amount of financing. So I don't want it to be construed that there's any kind of a guarantee, because we're not actually discussing the project and the approval of the funds today. One thing I would like to talk about, though, would be the design aspects of it, because if you are going to be coming after funding from this group, we do have a say in the design of the project. And I don't want you to get approvals from other agencies within the town and then come to us, and then we have changes we'd like to see made to the project, because that would kind of be after the fact and would change what you were presenting to the other groups for those approvals. So today I would like to talk about some design considerations for you guys to try to incorporate for your other submittals, so that it would kind of be a cohesive design that would be going after all of the approvals. So I do want to get into that. Steve, you were going to say something, and I want to hear from other people what they feel like they would like to talk about in regards to the project, and then we can kind of share our ideas.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tots. I would like to weigh in on that as a group. I was going to start by just saying I made a very candid comment earlier about the cost and the anticipated value, and that's a shame on me for not catching who all was in the meeting at the time. So there was no animosity there. That was merely, I thought I was talking amongst 8 people and there were 15. So I genuinely am excited for this rehab as well. I just wanted to make the comment as we were talking about funds that there may or may not be some adjustments here. And I am still a little bit confused on the math, because one page says 76,000, one page says 91,000, and the 12,000 you clarified, Lindsay, actually works perfectly against the 76,000, but it seems like you need to spend 91 to make it happen. So maybe I'm a little bit more confused, and I would love if you just looked into that and maybe followed up with us on exactly how that's broken down and how it can be clarified so that we can truly say, is that 25,000 accurate? Because I think a very big conversation we need to have internally, individually, and then collectively next week or next month is how we disperse funds to Cohatch and Tipsy Mermaid, and can we or can't we add funds to those projects to make them go as well the way they want to. So I want to make that that statement because I want to be very clear that I think we all want all three of these to go and provide funds for them, but we also need to really understand what's being asked and what we can do and can't do. And so I just want to make sure that that 25,000 is as broken up and real as it possibly can be, so we can look at it in all honesty next month or the next time you apply with those numbers. So that being said, I think Todd's on the right path. I say we all jump into the design and help get to a stage where your next submissions to other entities makes a lot of sense.
Okay. And then, so in regards to the design, obviously our responsibility is only review of the existing building and what's being done to that. But as part of our rules, when additional work is done to a building following the work that, you know, is part of our grant process, we do have a say in those future work for a certain period of time. And so I do feel like, because our funding is going to be tied to this larger project, I view this entire project as something that would fall under our purview and kind of our approval or not approval, because what you do on the addition impacts the appearance of the existing building. So I just want to make it clear that our comments today would not just be on the existing building, but it would also be on the addition, because the addition does have an impact on the existing building. And then with that, I do have some comments, but I'll save mine for the end. If anybody else would like to discuss the design and make some suggestions.
I think that I have a quick question about the finish of the siding that is proposed. Is it a flat or is it a pressed textured finish on either one of those lap dimensions?
So right now we're showing everything as being a smooth lap. It wouldn't be a faux pressed cedar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is that the same for the trim as well? I noted that the comment was cedar composite.
Yeah, for what we're showing right now and kind of what we've worked through with Dr. Nicholson, everything would be a smooth finish, with just the trim being various sizes depending on where it's at, whether it's at the corner or the eave or the window trim, and then the two different size in lap, the lower being the 8 and the upper being the 4. Yeah.
And the siding and the trim both being fiber cement?
Correct.
I have a question to the group, the committee. I know we mentioned the roofing being a maintenance item, but do we weigh in on the color when that time comes?
Yes, we would have review of all colors.
My other question, just design-wise, is I see in a rendering separate from the packet that there's some existing, they may be existing turned columns, and then elsewhere there are square posts, I believe. If you could speak to the decision or thinking around the column stylings.
Yeah, I think that the intent right there was to keep the existing ones from a style standpoint, but where we're going with new construction, there's a little bit of a different look as far as where the entrances are. We're proposing actual storefront entrances for some of those, just from a visual standpoint, going in and out of the building. And so with that more modern interpretation from an entrance standpoint, we went with more of a square type column on some of those overhang areas.
Mm-hmm.
But if you'd like to see a more ornamental column in some of those areas, I don't think that's anything that we'd be opposed to.
I'm wondering whether between the narrow siding at the top and the wider siding at the bottom, there's been any consideration of having a trim board there to separate those as opposed to just arbitrarily changing the overlap. Somehow it feels like it needs a little something there. Or I don't know, I would be interested in what some of the rest think as well. Also a little bit concerned about and I realize it's difficult, but the variation in pitch on the eaves at multiple places. When you can see so many different ones at the same time, it feels a little bit confusing to see that many different roof pitches. Maybe that's not something you can, depending on the structure, I realize that it's difficult, but
Yeah, this was Paul. Yeah, this is Paul. I hear what you're saying. I think a lot of that is the fact that we've been looking at two-dimensional, we've been looking at these two-dimensional drawings that once we develop it further, that we need to get a better set, I guess, of a rendering that gives a perspective, I think, from the street level so that we can understand the roof pitch. And if that needs to be adjusted, then we can look at that to make it congruent and tie in well.
And I'd be more than happy to kind of go back through some of the two renderings that we showed. In regards to the question about kind of the trim line, I mean, we could absolutely look at, having a transition there. I think when we had originally looked at it, I think there was some discussion on whether or not it wanted to be divided by a white trim band, and I think we wanted it to be to have just the size be the change, so that it wasn't kind of striped from a white trim at that standpoint. But I think that we could look at a larger trim board at that transition if maybe it was in one of the two siding colors, or we could look at it the other way again and just kind of go back to Dr. Nicholson and get his input on that.
I personally like it without the trim separation, so I'm just curious what other members think. I'd hate for that just be 2 of 7 saying something.
I think I agree, Steve, with you. I enjoy kind of the clean, I guess, texture that it gives without subdividing it so much from a facade standpoint. I think too that we likely, if I'm reading this correctly, will likely have a vertical gutter along that location just to the left of that new storefront entrance. So that will also kind of break up this facade. Correct me if I'm wrong, but then I think, in the future consideration of what color that gutter would be, because that will be introducing a vertical line right there on that facade, will be interesting to explore. I think a couple other kind of future considerations are where will signage be and what will lighting look like, particularly at night, would be of interest.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think from a gutter standpoint, we would probably keep the gutters and downspouts consistent with the trim color. So I think from that standpoint, going back and looking exactly where those downspouts are coming down based on the actual roof pitches and then how they impact that from a visual standpoint. Yeah, we can take a look at that. So when we come back to you, that's kind of a clearly visualized within the drawings that we're showing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that does help support in my opinion, my design opinion of the not needing a trim board there at that horizontal moment.
So something that catches my eye that I'd like to bring up for others' input is window placement. I know we're looking at a bit of a conceptual rendering at this point, but just location of windows and their scale and how they hit, for example, like frieze boards or other trim boards. And in some cases, the window head is the frieze, or at least implies to be. In other cases, the window head is below. In other cases, well below, to where there'll be a strip of siding. And in one case, a window actually severs on the south elevation. It kind of severs that transition of trim material line, kind of cuts right in the middle of it. So I think consistency among those and scale thought out in some of those gables. If we're replacing windows, we can rethink how we trim around those, and just letting them all be very consistent and not feel like it's been 3 or 4 or 5 different decisions made over the course of renovations and remodelings. Make it seem like it's all been cleaned up collectively, and you've built the same sense of architecture into the whole mass.
Absolutely. We can go back and look at that from a size and placement standpoint. Obviously, you know, when we're dealing with the existing windows, you know, some of those, especially the ones that are kind of high up in those gable ends, right? We kind of run out of room from a trim standpoint. But I think to your point about the one on the south, that's actually within a stair. So I think that leads to where that height specifically is. That's kind of you're turning and going up that run to the second floor. So there may be some consideration going to move that either possibly to the east face to maybe get it lower so it doesn't interact with that transitional point from a color standpoint. So
okay.
And to piggyback onto the window, I noticed that the new building has grids in the windows and the existing does not on parts of it, and it does on other. It may have to do with the window sizes as well. I would want it to be very consistent, but I also have a concern if whether or not they're going to be true divided lights. You know, if they're true divided lights, that's okay. If it's grids inside of the windows, you know, I would not support that because that has a faux look to it, and we definitely try for authenticity. And so I just want to make sure that if you're proposing grids, you do it consistently, and if so, they'd have to be true divided lights.
yeah, I would say from the ones on the existing, and again, that I think that on the elevation, we do have divided lights on pretty much the vast majority of the windows, including the all of the lower windows and all the larger upper windows. I think the only ones on the A201 sheet that we're essentially not showing that would have a divided light would be the small single hung windows that are essentially on the second floor of the existing building, and maybe the small windows that are within the stair as you turn that corner. Paul, I do not recall if the existing windows on the building right now are true divided light or if they're the double hungs.
As they would say, it's a mixture right now, so we'd have to correct that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like a mix match of windows that are on there now, and you know, a lot of them aren't original. So
some are vinyl. It's a little bit of everything. So we'll have to. That's part of what we're going to be doing.
Todd, when you say true divided light, you mean like a well done simulated divided light? That's you don't mean okay.
Yeah, it would have to have the grid on the outside of the glass pane on both the interior and the exterior. It would not have to be individual pieces of glass. But I would also take a look at the window grid patterns. This particular historical style of house probably wouldn't have had the grid patterns that you guys are showing. So you may want to do some kind of historical research on this style of home, like Victorian Queen Anne type of thing, and maybe get a pattern that might be more respectful to that. And I think it might give you a little bit more kind of an interesting historical look instead of this standard pattern that you can find on every suburban house. That might be something to look into that kind of give you a little bit of interest and uniqueness to it.
With that being said, would you prefer that we not do a divided light and just do
Oh, no, I'd just say look at the patterns because window companies have different patterning.
Yeah.
And, you know, it may be that it's 4/4 instead of a 6/6 or a 2/1 or something like that. That would be more in keeping with the original style of the house.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think overall, because we've kind of dug into some of the details, it's looking really nice. I want to make sure I pause and say that I think that the addition is respectful from a volume standpoint. The massing feels good. I think like now we're kind of honing into the look and the feel of the materiality. But I think overall it is really nice. I think the one thing I'd be curious to hear thoughts on would be the column styling that I brought up, because I'm a little bit two-minded about it myself, of which is more appropriate and balanced, of whether we want the turned or whether we want to recommend this, more squared approach. So I'm two-minded about it myself.
All right, so I think that kind of ties into my next comment, which would be whenever we're doing an addition to an existing building, we want to go one of two routes. One would be exact match or completely different. What I see in front of me looks like an almost match, but not quite. And that ties into like, well, what do you do with the columns? Are we trying to make this look different? It's an addition, or are we trying to make it look like, it was all built this way at one point? And right now it's kind of the almost match, but not quite a match. So just something for you guys to think about design wise would be to have the different pieces maybe read more individual. Right now, when you wrap the gray siding all the way around this on the first floor, it kind of emphasizes the horizontality of it, where the existing historical home has more vertical proportions. And so I think wrapping that same horizontal siding around the first floor it kind of goes against the style of the original home, and also makes this feel like it just keeps going on and on and on. And so I would look at maybe different portions of the building having, like all one color, or there's some vertical breaks, or, where you have the new entryway or some of these gables, that's one color. And then there's a section, that's another color or something. So breaking it up more vertically as opposed to horizontally like you've done might start letting the individual pieces read more as individual pieces, and then that could guide us on whether those columns are to look like the original or if it's to look like something totally different. So part of the addition might look exactly like the original house, and then you get to the entry point and it's got storefront and it's got modern columns, and it's clear that hey, this is an addition, this is the entry point. I've got the utmost respect for Axis. You guys are phenomenal designers. And I think that maybe there's another level of design to this. I think that you guys are capable of, and it may be having to convince Nicholson to allow you to do that. But
that's my job. But you guys, are you guys saying that you would, and I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. I think it's super important that the look from Oak Street remains intact and period. And are you saying when we turn the corner onto Elm and the addition, we make a clean break there and try to make it fit without being period?
Well, that sounds more like a kind of a plan commission thing with the whole Zionsville theme. So I can't weigh in on what they would approve. But I think as an individual and a member of this committee, I don't think that it has to match exactly in order to be appropriate and something that we might support, or at least that I personally would support.
I'm thinking about, like what happened with the Lemon Bar building, which I think is really cool, is, do we do something that's, clean, keeping that existing building, very pure and period, and then maybe taking a bit of a complementary dive into something a little more modern with the addition.
I think that would be good because I think you guys on this one are struggling with kind of the mass of the building and then trying to put pitched roofs on it. And then your pitched roofs end up being a shallow pitched roof, which I think is to the detriment of the project. And so if you had a little bit more freedom, maybe you could make some more interesting roof lines potentially.
Yeah.
One of the issues, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I don't disagree with everything we're talking about here. I think this one, I think also where you're going, Todd, a little bit is this one's close. I think Access could really get this into a position where this addition feels very period as well, and starts to be a really neat extension of the, the older part of the building, the existing structure. But in that case, to answer Kara's question, I guess more directly, is if we're going to go that route, if this goes that route of trying to mesh and work and be a nice mass that works well with the original mass, then the columns should match. It should really attempt to all be the same. Even if it's not the same pitches or whatever it ends up being, it will be an addition that will be relatively obvious, but decisions made a step above this, where Todd, you were kind of leading, I think would do wonders for this addition. And then I think it should all match in terms of columns. And then I think some corrections to the siding to help with vertical stuff, I agree with. That being said, we then went off and digressed about, could it be totally different? I also agree with that, but it would have to be old versus new in my mind. It would have to be a genuine, look what we did in 2021 to this really cool old building and respected it, but then tied something new into it. And in that case, please do not match the columns. Please do not bring little spindle columns to it. So I could totally agree with either way, but it can't be a tweener. It can't be stuck in this, like, we just went the cheap route and we got 6-12 pitches everywhere because it's totally new and it's an addition. It would have to go one way or the other.
Yeah, I think, Steve, you captured kind of why I feel two-minded about the columns, because I feel like the vision of what the addition is supposed to be is just not yet fully articulated. Is it a matching and a marrying, or is it a respectful deviation with a nice little hinge? So I think getting clarity on what it is wanting to be will help us give the right input back to, is it doing it successfully and appropriately in the village?
Yeah. And I think too, that might be something, Paul, that we go back and talk to Dr. Nicholson about and say, we kind of have these two diverging, ideas. Which one do we really want to lean into, right? Do we really want to make it look like it's just an extension of the existing one? And in that case, how do we use, whether it's siding profiles or trim profiles to complement that, going back and looking at the entrances and that sort of thing? Or do we say, do we go back and look at more of a monochromatic scheme for the existing building and keeping with what it is now? And quite frankly, with the vast majority of these sorts of kind of more colonial Georgia style homes are fairly monochromatic, with the exception of, some of them have more detailed, eave corbelling and that sort of thing, which this building doesn't have currently. And then do we take a different approach to the addition, and maybe if it has a similar form and a similar windows, do we look at more of a modern interpretation from a siding application? Is it an alternate lap size or something else that you don't see on a more traditional home? So.
Yeah, and I've got the utmost confidence in you guys being able to do that, because you do a lot of work within existing contexts, and have been able to do, things that read as, built today, but are respectful for its surroundings. And so I think, it would sound like we're supportive of either route, whether you go with completely different or you go with, match exactly. I think we'd be okay with that as long as there's consistency.
Great.
I'd like to say, go ahead, Carol.
I would agree that, Todd, I like your idea of the initial building more monochromatic feel, as opposed to continuing that horizontal line. I think that long horizontal line is part of what, to me, made it feel less, less authentic, and I know that's not always what we're looking for, but it just seems like the break from the original house in terms of the horizontal siding being in two parts like that would be more pleasing, and just, it would give the eye a break.
That's fair.
I'd like to just fall in that it sounds exciting to have the new addition be more of an homage and to the existing house rather than them coming together. I agree, it's very, very horizontal. And it would be kind of fun to have in the village, something that does taste a little bit more towards contemporary. It'd be really nice. I think that's where the demographics of the village, where we're going with everything else that's happening. It'd be kind of fun to let the existing building be really cool, but then the addition be, you could have just an homage to it in detailing in some places. So welcome to the Zionsville Architectural Review.
Yeah, but I think as far as, you know, the budget you've put together, it respects our guidelines for being work done to the existing building. And I think that with these refinements that we're talking about, I'm getting the feeling that the committee would be supportive of this project, and you know, very positive feeling towards it moving forward.
Awesome.
I agree with that without a doubt.
All right. So just keep us posted. We do post an agenda approximately 1 week before each meeting. And so if there's a point where you want to present new things to us, just make sure to reach out to Roger, letting him know you'd like to be on the agenda, and provide him materials for us to review at least 1 week prior to the hearing so that we can get you on the agenda.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you all.
So you're gonna show
All
us as that we're asking then for a continuance.
Yes.
Back to the original request. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we would, I'd be looking for a motion to continue discussions on this project to a later date when the applicant is ready to present new information.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, Roger, roll call.
All right. Kara Weber,
Yay.
Todd Rotman,
Yay.
Tom Castellini,
Yay.
David Roush. Sorry, yes, we lost David. Steve Heron,
Yay.
Earl Mullen.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Thank you guys
Really
very much
appreciate
for your
what
presentation.
And I appreciate what you're doing for the town. Thank you.
Thank
Great,
you. Look
thank you.
forward to seeing our next meeting.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right. The last item on new business is the additional 2021 funding. We did discuss that already, that we received an additional $50,000. So we have an annual budget of $100,000 for this year. Any other discussion on that topic?
Not from me.
All
We have
right.
more.
Well, I think if we continue to get exciting projects like this, I would be in support of us requesting additional funding, because these are some of the best projects that we have seen over the last couple of years. And I think it's really exciting. And I think the town is very supportive of that kind of development work. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right, second with Tom. Roll call.
All right, Mr. Rotman,
Yay.
Mr. Castellini,
Betcha.
Mr. Heron,
Yay.
Ms. Mullet,
Yes.
Ms. Weber.
Yay.
Thank you.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate your patience.
Yep. Thank you.
all.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Enjoy the day.
Bye.
Ciao.
See you.
Have a good rest of the week.
You too.
Ah.